Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Miriam Sheril from Form3. She is also the co-chair of the Faster Payment Council Operational Considerations for Real-Time Payments Work Group. That's quite a mouthful. I think I did okay.
I did make sure Donna said that and not me. So.
Well, welcome, Miriam. It's just such a pleasure to join you here today and to talk a little bit about all that's happening in the payments industry. So really, we just want to glean some advice and some information from you. But before we do that, would you mind introducing our audience to who you are, the work that you do at Form3, and maybe a little bit of your background in the payments industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep myself time checked because unfortunately I can yabber on and on. So I'm Miriam Sheril. So as you mentioned, I work for Form3. I'm the head of product for the U.S. Briefly, Form3 is a payments technology platform provider. So we do payment processing, and Form3 started like 7 years ago, the UK and Europe, and now we're entering the US market, obviously focusing on instant payments to start and faster payments, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's a hint as to what I think is the most important thing going on right now. But their real mindset behind Form3 is kind of modern future solutions. So 24/7 world, instant payments, fast processing, high volumes, really needing modern technology. So the whole company is founded on cloud, multi-cloud, agnostic solutions, APIs, all of that. And we're kicked off the US last year. So I joined to kick off the product team. Before that, I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. So very different world just from the perspective of kind of Federal Reserve versus like a private sector, venture capital funded company. So it's been a lot of fun for me. And I spent the last 3 years at the Fed on the Fednow program. So working on leading the Fednow product delivery team. That was my role. So lots of excitement. Definitely nobody's going to question what I think is important right now with that background.
Thank you so much for that. And it's pretty exciting because all of that work that you put into Fednow is obviously going to come to fruition next month in July. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't, ever look back and kind of question my move. It was hard to leave the Fednow team. They're like family. But I did it kind of when the build was pretty much done. So the work that I was primarily responsible for, I felt good about and really wanted to go to the other side. Like hearing everything when you work from the Fednow perspective, from service providers, from banks about challenges. And I was kind of itching to like go help from the other side. But I will say a little bit of FOMO for those who don't have a 13-year-old daughter, that's fear of missing out. A little bit of FOMO with the launch. So I feel like a baby of mine is going to college without me, but it is really exciting. I'm so happy for that team.
That's great. Well, okay, so you kind of gave us a little bit of foreshadowing about what you might talk about here, but what would you say is the most notable trend in the payments industry today?
Yeah, so I obviously do think it's instant payments and faster payments. I think it's a broad topic. It covers a lot, so people might be like, oh, it's digital transformation. Oh, it's certain payment use cases. I think faster payments or instant payments, I'm gonna have to pick one for this podcast. I'm gonna go with instant payments. Covers all of that. Like it all kind of ties together. So I said this on the last podcast I did for FPC. I'm in this space because I think in 10 years, instant payments is going to be the critical infrastructure. Before Fednow, I worked on FedWire. So very used to like critical infrastructure, something that's not going away. It's kind of foundational. We're not there yet with instant payments, but I think we will be. And then it's going to be so important. It's going to matter so much. All the modernization projects going on now, digital, payments, and everything is going to get tied into it. Because let's face it, we're all a bit spoiled. 24/7 is the world. Like on Saturday, we want to do something, we want to do something. And the time period of hearing you can't get your money right now or, anything like that is going away. We're the day of Amazon Prime, same day delivery, where I ordered something this morning and it showed up 2 hours ago, which is pretty impressive. That's payments. And we're not going to get there without all the infrastructure in place. So I think we have a long way to go to get there. That's, why there needs to be more players in the space. That's why I joined Form3. But I think it's going to really drive huge industry change over the next few years.
I think so too. Let's just face it. We want that immediate gratification, right?
And money's behind a lot of what
Oh,
we
yes.
want. So,
So, kind of shifting gears, part of the reason why we do this podcast is to provide some insights and advice to payments professionals. So, what would you say is the greatest opportunity today for organizations that process payments?
well, so same theme, but I do want to push this mindset because I've been hearing about it. We talked to a lot of banks as Form3, like we're kind of getting into the market. There are a lot of banks who have done what they've done with RTP, which really set a baseline, like they set the stage. So I don't think Fednow coming takes away from RTP. I actually think it's going to help. And now both of the networks are really going to grow. But many of the banks who did do RTP and are now looking at Fednow and seeing this kind of growth that they've seen and what's coming next, they're still looking at their solutions going, well, we put something in, but it's not kind of built for the future. It's not, so I think instant payments is the biggest opportunity, but I actually think it's the biggest opportunity right now for banks and for not just banks, but providers, whether they're service providers like we are, whether they're building front end UI screens, whether they're building, bill pay applications or payroll applications. You have a chance right now because it's new and the volumes are low and we have to get to network effect to do things differently, to do things more modern, to make a mistake potentially and fix it before it becomes a big problem, right? So you think about Fedwire and the ISO migration, you're going to be really risk averse in how you go about that. So you're not going to want to, jump to a new vendor. You're not going to want to use potentially someone like us that's a multi-cloud solution, although we are building Fedwire and there is interest, but at a different level, right? So with faster payments or instant payments, I said I would say instant payments. I'm going to keep doing that. But anyways, there's a chance now, like you can try to go to a new provider out there. You can use someone new who's building on the modern technologies and not updating old ones because it's not as risky. Like you're not going to have so many payments flowing over the rails so fast. You can control it. You can do it from a crawl, walk, run perspective, right? You could start with receive only. But if you do it right and you do it with that mindset, then in 10 years, when it is critical and there's tons of volume, you're built for 10 years from now. So you went to a vendor who's got a multi-cloud solution already so that in 10 years, when everyone's on AWS and everyone goes, oh, crud, what happens if AWS has a problem? Now we all have to go multi-cloud. Like you can already find the providers out there who are offering those more modern, different solutions, and you don't have to be as worried about doing it. I think that's the biggest opportunity right now. It's like, yes, you should do instant payments. You should do it right now, but you can also do it differently. Mm-hmm. And I really think banks, especially, and also those who are out there looking to build solutions, should think about that more. Don't fall back on what you know and fall back on like, well, I have that relationship with that vendor and maybe I didn't love it, but I know it and it's safe. Like you don't have to be so safe right now. And that's the opportunity I think everyone should really start focusing on.
I think that's great. So banks tend to think that what they've been doing for the last 20, 30 years is safest. But actually, if they're going to go to real-time payment, which they all will eventually have to, this is the safest time to make that transition, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
And banks don't, right? I mean, I'm sure you talk to lots of banks and we talk to lots of banks. It's like, the conversation was always like, well, we know it's not great. We really want to be more modern. We really want to do something better, but it's safe. Like, at least I know. So it's really that mindset of, but you don't have to be safe right now. Like, I think it's crazy to talk to bankers and say, you don't have to be safe right now. Like, I get a lot of weird looks, but really it's true. You don't have to be so safe right now. So take the risk because in the end, everybody knows eventually the more modern solutions, those who are more tech, minded, more future-proofed, especially with something like this. Like you can't take your ACH batch end-of-day processes and plug them in here. I mean, you might get away with it to start, but eventually you're going to be behind the game because nobody's going to be doing batch anymore. There's not going to be end-of-day processes that you're willing to wait for. You're not going to take down your systems for an hour every night. So instead of going safe because fine, I can do that right now and it'll work for the next few years, don't be safe. Go to someone that has no end-of-day process. Be willing to use a vendor for the big banks out there, right? Who are like, no, I'll build it myself. Now you're going to be building something that you have to maintain all the time. That's 24/7, that has MQ servers and all this stuff. Like take that risk and take that chance. It is
Mhm.
a very hard conversation to have with bankers, I will admit. But it's like now, in 3 years, maybe you won't be willing to anymore because if you haven't done it, and in 3 years, lots of payments have moved over and all the banks or most of the banks are on these networks, then it's going to be really a hard time to try to do something different.
Right. Well, and I think it's worth pointing out that banks are bankers, right? That's their core business. They're not technology folks. So perhaps this is the time to really lean on vendors and technology experts that kind of can help them navigate this transition instead of trying to go it alone.
Yeah.
um, and building something, um, perhaps that's designed specifically for today's and future payments is probably a whole lot more ideal than just another band-aid, right?
Yeah, well, that's the key. We have a lot of conversations where we're realizing it's the CIO, it's the CTO, it's the that they're the ones who are going to their CEO, CPO. Hey, let's go talk to Form 3 because you know what? That's the technology that I would want to implement.
Right.
Because you're right, a banker is a banker. At the end of the day, the business case is process payments. Okay, now do it 24/7 because your customers are going to want it. And you have that whole chicken and egg conversation because until we have network effect, it's really hard, right, to sell that you need to do this now. The problem is once you have network effect, you're late. So
Yeah,
like it's,
exactly. Yeah.
but then it's the technology, partners at these banks who are like, you know what, like they understand kind of this win of, well, we can try this now and I don't have to go, write up 75 memos about why I'm going to do something in the cloud because it's not Fedwire, I'm not moving Fedwire to the cloud so fast. It's this new payment rail. I'm not going to be processing so much just yet on it. I'm going to do it slowly. I'm going to start with receiving payments. I'll prove it out, and then you can grow it from there. So you're right, definitely. I think it's the technology angle, and that's, I mean, going back to my background, like that's my whole career. I started in tech, and so I always like to talk about how I put this like line between tech and business, and that's where I sit because everything's merging, right? You don't have like the product folks who could be like, "Oh, I don't care about technology. I just want my requirements." That doesn't work anymore. Like product and tech are one thing at this point.
Right, right. I agree. So, what would you say is the biggest challenge today for organizations that process payments?
I can't repeat myself, right? It's people not wanting to try things new. Well, no, I'll shift gears. I do think that is a challenge, but that's more of a challenge of what's kind of blocking, I think, banks from implementing faster payments and instant payments. Shifting totally though to the question, because I think you can answer that a totally different way, like end user perspective, consumer perspective, business perspective. What's the problem today in the processing payments? And it's time, right?
Mhm.
It's, well, I can't do it on the weekends, and like my husband's the general counsel of a real estate company. They want to start doing deals on the weekends. Says nothing for work life balance, and I'm never letting him sign up for Fednow. No, I'm kidding. But at the end of the day, the businesses are changing. We're going to this 24/7 world. We're going to instant gratification. Amazon Prime example. That means money has to move on the weekends. It can't today, right? That's the biggest challenge. We do have card networks. So cards really is a 24/7 world, but cards is very unique and very specific. You're not, closing your mortgage on your house over a card payment and things like that. So the fact that we don't have anything that's kind of stood up centrally, we have RTP now, so I think that's helped, but we haven't hit network effect. But I think having Fednow come to fruition on top of that with a Federal Reserve and the master accounts that will be there and the liquidity that can start moving, businesses will start opening up payment use cases over the weekends because we'll have payments that can move over the weekend and be irrevocable and all have all the regulations on top of it. We don't have that today. That's one of the biggest pain points, the time behind it, and then the exception processing. ACH, like, yeah, you have 3 days, 3 times that you can settle during the day, but that's not an instant payment. When I pay you, you're not seeing that in your account instantly. So then there's the time, there's the exception processing, there's the fact of what's allowed as far as lack of irrevocability and things like that. So from a consumer business perspective, that's the pain point. Like, wait, I just want my money right now. That's why we use Zelle and Venmo and PayPal.
Right.
Those limits are really low because at the end of the day, what's behind them isn't critical infrastructure moving that money. So those limits will never get to the point of allowing real estate deals and you be able to buy your house on the weekend or a car. So that to me is probably the biggest challenge in the environment. And of course, because I stick to my topic, but I really do believe it. Instant payments will solve it once we get there.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So this is probably the trickiest question to answer because it's like taking all of your knowledge and experience and wrapping it up into, a neat little package, one little package. What is your silver bullet piece of advice for professionals that in the payment space?
Okay, but I'm going to sound like a broken record.
That's okay.
It's to take the risk and do something different and new now. Think about 10 years from now. I truly think in this whole industry around faster payments, instant payments, we are also focused on how do we get to adoption, and we're falling back on, well, use what you have and plug it in. Use what you have and plug it in. I truly think it's a big mistake. We're going to do it, and then in 5 years, there's going to be this big like, oh, shoot, that doesn't work. That was a Band-Aid.
Right.
So I really think the silver bullet for any bank, provider, vendor who's looking into different types of solutions, service providers like Form3 connecting banks to Rails, do something new, future-proofed, look at the best technology out there. Like, do not fall back on your old solutions. It's like 10 years ago when anybody was still like trying to put mainframe solutions in place. It was like, stop talking about mainframes. Like think about 10 years from now, mainframes will be done. So same thing, like don't look at what you have now. Don't try to repeat history. Think about how this is new, build for it like it's new. And it's not just the technology, it's even the operation. So you mentioned the work group whose name I will not repeat because I don't know if I can say it out loud. But even there, what we've seen or been hearing is like the operations teams trying to reuse, like, oh, it's like my wire back office. Oh, it's like my ACH back. No, it's not. It's not either one of those. Like you cannot reconcile instant payments the same way you reconcile either of those. You have to think about the fact that this is 24/7, that there's no end of day, that your time zones are going to be different, that matters now. You got to come up with a new process that leverages what you've done in these other areas, but that is built fit for purpose for instant payments. And I think that's the silver bullet. If you can convince your teams and your executives that this is new and I'm going to build it differently because it's new, but therefore I'm going to get it right and in 10 years be ahead of the game. That's how people are going to be winners in this space.
That's great advice. Okay, so before I let you go, Miriam, I just want to make sure that our audience knows how to learn more about Form3 and the services you provide, and perhaps also about some of the deliverables that are going to be coming through the operational considerations work group. So if you want to share a little bit on that, that would be great.
Sure. So as for me, I'm on LinkedIn. So Miriam Sheril, you can look me up. You can send me a message. I like friends. Form3, you can Google Form3. We have a public website. I will say when I was interviewing, actually, I did that. The API documentation is actually public. They share it. It's probably the best API documentation that's publicly available that I've ever seen. I did join and say, are you guys scared about people stealing your APIs? But they're not. So you can look us up there as well. And then, just be in touch. As for the operational work group, again, not saying the whole name. I'm really excited about it. So I was super excited to be on this and to be leading it because it's really looking at the perspective of banks who have built already for RTP. With the thinking of, and now what's coming with Fednow, and we're going to take it slowly. So we're starting with receive only. The first bulletin is going to be around what do you have to think about if you want to implement, faster payments for receive only, RTP or Fednow. High level, here's like the bucket areas. Obviously, now that you've all heard me talk, you can tell that there's going to be a lot in there about it's not ACH, it's not wire, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. You got to do something different, but really calling it out. And we've been lucky, we got a lot of banks to participate. So those who have already implemented to just kind of give their lessons learned. And then we're going to enhance it. We're going to add sending capability and we're going to add the non-value like the request for payment or request for information and things like that. So I think it's going to be a really, really useful resource.
Wonderful. Well, I actually serve with you on that work group, and that's just been a pleasure. I'm learning a ton. So as soon as we have, links to any of the deliverables, I'll make sure that I add it to the description of this video so folks can look into that as well. But Miriam, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. I also want to thank everybody for watching. Have a great day.
Bye.